afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Mikalis and Carla for inviting me for this conference. You know, when they asked me to send their slides for this talk, I did not send the slides till last night. And I tell you why. Because I wanted to come here and feel what the city is like. I wanted to speak to as many youth as possible. I wanted to connect with as many of you as possible. And I got the opportunity to do it yesterday at the boot camp. And I was able to have a feel of what is it that is important for us to understand and learn about entrepreneurship. Now, the best definition of entrepreneurship I've ever heard is doing a lot more with a lot less. When you have very little, that's when you become the better entrepreneur, okay? So I'm the founder of Startup Malaysia, but before that I have had a few companies, not the billion-dollar companies that Shelley was talking about, but I've had my own companies, I've sold them. But after that, I said to myself, what will it be if, when I was a young boy, someone inspired me to leave my job and go and start a company? They said, if you want to do well, become an entrepreneur. And I didn't know what an entrepreneur was. So I started to go to school, go to university, study, and came out, started working for people. And then I realized that when you work for someone, you are actually solving a problem in an indirect way. That means if 50 people are working for someone, the company is solving someone's problem in an indirect way. Why not I go out and solve the problem myself? And that's how I became an entrepreneur. And then once I've sold my companies and become somewhat reasonably successful, I said, what will it be if I travel around Malaysia to help the poorer kids, the more underprivileged young people, to think about entrepreneurship? Because a lot of them think that to be an entrepreneur, you need to have a rich uncle, that you need to know a politician, or your parents must be rich. If not, they cannot become an entrepreneur. This is what many young people think. So over the period, I had the opportunity of mixing with a lot of people and started Startup Malaysia. I was given a fellowship by the US State Department to go and meet President Obama. That photo was taken by me. I also have my own startup called Decode, where we teach children how to code. And coding is a very important skill for young people, because if you want to build a high-growth startup, coding is very important. And Mikalis, I heard mentioned about the global startup youth. Last month we said, you see, a lot of problems happen with youth, right? One of the things that youth face is once they start their companies, they don't know how to take it to the next level. They say, we do not have enough money, we do not have experienced mentors, we do not have friends overseas, we do not know how to go global. And this is what most youth feel. Can you tell me if you guys feel that way, and how many of you feel that way? Please put up your hands. There's no problem here. Nobody has the problem. So, I don't know. So this is what at least some of the Malaysian youth feel. That's what many youth feel. So I conceptualized a program. Why don't we bring 500 youth to the room, 250 from Malaysia, 250 from around the world, and do a 3-day event like a startup weekend and get things done. And that's what we did. So we had pitching. Shelley is right there. And so we did this big event. But prior to that, we have done many events which help. So after doing all this and coming and speaking here, I thought, what is it that I should talk to you about? And this is basically from my own experience, as well as my education in Cambridge, where this actually blew my mind, is how entrepreneurs, expert entrepreneurs, actually think and act. What Who is an expert entrepreneur? An expert entrepreneur is someone who's done it many, many times, who has failed, who has succeeded, who has taken companies for listing, who has started small, who's done it. So the research basically has been done on many entrepreneurs. It's like putting a kind of sensor on the brains of the entrepreneurs and found how expert entrepreneurs actually think. This is not theoretical. This is actually how you work. It may look simple, but you will be able to relate to it. And I urge you to pay attention, because if you want to start your venture tomorrow, what is it that you want to put between your teeth today and take it out? Most entrepreneurs start with being inspired. They want to be inspired. Then they say, I'm inspired, I want more information. And then they said, I want to learn how to do something. They want implementation, and then they go for incubation and investment. This is something that most entrepreneurs go through. Now, what type of a person can become an entrepreneur? A lot of people think entrepreneurs are born, and they are not made, which is not true. It's not a DNA. Okay? Everyone can be an entrepreneur. So it is like being scientific. You learn science in school. You won't become an Einstein, but you can learn and become more scientific. So if you learn the process of becoming an entrepreneur, you can become an entrepreneur. Or else, you will fall into the Frank Sinatra school of entrepreneurship. Do you know what the Frank Sinatra school of entrepreneurship is? I did it my way. Okay? And you keep on doing it my way, and then you keep on failing. Okay? So, there is a lot of statistics about 1 to 10 companies, only will succeed and blah, 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 whatever. And those statistics are true. However, who becomes a real successful entrepreneur? Someone who starts a venture, right? If you don't start a venture, you just think about it, you're not going to become an entrepreneur. So you got to start something somewhere. You got to start small. You got to think about something and start something. The other is your attitude to failure. As you start, what happens is your venture will definitely fail, right? It's not a judgment, but it is a statistic, okay? Your venture would fail. But after each venture, you would fail faster and fail cheaper. I was in a conference, and the guy said, I had $5 million, and my whole company failed. And I told him that I could have failed cheaper. I could have kept 4.5 million and failed at 500,000. So, so that's the thing. The thing is the art of failing cheaper and faster. And the more you do it, that's why I put the chessboard there, because it's like playing chess. To become a master chess player, you've got to play a lot of times, and you've got to do it, which means you don't have to start many companies, but you can start many small projects and see whether it works. And many expert entrepreneurs start with the means. Who am I? What do I know? And who do I know? This is all they start with. They don't start with a lot of big money. Whether you take Richard Branson, or whether you take with Bill Gates, or any story you read, they have always started with these three things. Very basic, and then they start, okay? And then they do the doable, and then they push it, and then they push it a bit more. Now, affordable loss is the fourth thing that you want to learn about. Now, we are taught in MBA programs, do your cash flow, do your return on investment analysis, and see what do I get, for the big bang for the buck. This is what we are always taught, right? But that's not how expert entrepreneurs work. Let's say you have a job that pays you $200,000 and you want to leave. You don't say, I'm going to leave my job and I want to make $2.5 million. Most of the time you say, I've always wanted to make a heart monitor because my dad died of a heart attack. I've always wanted to get into crowdsourcing transport because I find it very difficult to find a taxi. It takes too long, So you always wanted to do this. And you say, what can I afford to lose? That's how entrepreneurs start, not how big they can get. They will think big, but the plunge decision is always on what can I afford to lose, right? The third is they bring people on. My time's up, but I'm going to take 5 more minutes. They bring people early on in the game. That means they don't just keep their ideas in and not share. They always share their ideas. They get people, as many people involved. They say, this is my idea. I want to do this, okay? And do you think this is interesting for you? And that person would say, look, it's interesting, but only if you did this or did that. As long as the person has a skin in the game, it is negotiated, you go out and do it, right? There is never a perfect situation. All ventures are negotiated enterprises, whether you find an employee or find a co-founder. So you leverage on your connections. I think Shelley spoke about this. And the other thing is a surprise. I was in Silicon Valley before I came here. I met with Steve Blank. Before that, I met with a few people. And one of them said, if there are 10 things that controls a startup, you only can control 4 things. 6 things are beyond your control, right? So you will be surprised. Something will happen. But how can you leverage on the surprise? How can you take advantage of the surprise? That's the entrepreneurial mindset. How do you leverage on that? Based on this, on 1 to 6, you can see entrepreneurs do not need to predict the future. They create the future by making things happen. It's like cooking. You go to the you want to cook something, you go to the refrigerator and cook what's using the ingredients that's there. Or you go out and buy something. But most entrepreneurs do with what they have, and with that, something surprising may come out. So this is a big research, and this is how expert entrepreneurs think. A few things you need to know about all the types of businesses that exist: big business, small business, social enterprise, and scalable startups. That's where the new startups are. You should know there are 6 types of startups: lifestyle, small business, scalable, viable, social enterprise, and new division. These are the things you should know before you even start a startup. Right? You can't just start a small business and think it's going to go global, because the anatomy is not built that way. This is how I do it in Kuala Lumpur, in Malaysia, or other ecosystems, on how to create the number of startups. I persuade my government to say, let's inspire thousands of people. Let's get a lot of young people inspired into entrepreneurship. Then select a smaller group and give them very deep dive programs. And then take another group and help them build a startup and support them all the way to go to Silicon Valley. So this is how we do this. My last word, you'd never want a serious crisis to go to waste. So take action now and do it. Cheers.